Konnichiwa minasan, and welcome to the class in the second lecture series on Introduction to Japanese Language and Culture. So, in our last class we did Tsumori, Hoshigaru, Hoshi, and we learnt all these things to use them in kaiwa, how to make our kaiwa better. So, now today we are going to do a verb which is naru, which means to become, and see how that can be used in our conversation, make our language better. So, as I always do, let us listen to the kaiwa first and see how much you can understand.
ミラさんは忙しいですね。
そうですね、ラオさん。実は8月に論文発表があります。
でも今2月ですからまだ時間がありますよ。
それはそうですけど、発表にこちらの先生方だけじゃなくて、他の大学の先生方もいらっしゃるので、ちょっと心配です。それに実験も思ったより長くなったからちょっといろいろやらなきゃ。
それは大変ですね。頑張ってください。
So, you just heard the kaiwa, and the kaiwa is between Rao and Meera, and I told you earlier also that Meera is an Indian name, and I am sure you all know, but in Japanese Meera is Miller, which is an American name. So, well, we are using it as an Indian name over here. So, Meera-san to Rao-san no kaiwa desu. Futari wa ima tabun daigaku ni imasu. Rao-san wa Meera-san ni iroiro kiite imasu. Meera-san wa isogashi desu ne. Isogashi is busy, and ne over here, isn't it? Because he can see that she is running from one place to another. Jitsu wa 8月に論文発表があります。Jitsu wa means actually speaking, to tell you the truth. I have a 論文発表 in 8月。今2月ですからまだ時間がありますね。So, 今 is now, 今2月ですから、it's just 2月。まだ still 時間がありますね。You still have a lot of time. Why are you so flustered? それはそうですけど I know, I understand that, but 発表にこちらの先生方だけじゃなくて not only teachers from here 他の other 大学の先生方もいらっしゃるので they are going to come thus ちょっと心配です。Gata is polite for hito, and another word for kata. Kata and gata is exactly the same. Irasharu again over here because we are talking about teachers, and Meera-san is just a student. So, chotto shimpai desu. I am a little worried. Sore ni, and above this, more than all this that I have just told you, jikken wa omotta yori. Jikken is experiments, omotta yori. Nagaku natta kara. It has extended a little. The jikken that I was doing or I was supposed to do has extended, and thus chotto iroiro yaranakya. I have to do lot more because I have my happyo in 8月 and there are just 4 months left. 大変ですね。So, now Rao-san understands why she is so worried and flustered, and he says, 大変ですね. That's really tough on you. 頑張って So, it could just be 頑張って It could be 頑張ってください Maybe polite, being nice to her, and 頑張ってね would make it very, very informal, or Rao-san is so much more senior than Meera. So, any of these you can use. 頑張って、頑張ってください、頑張ってね. Intonation is always rising, and Meera says arigato. So, we are going to do these new words that we have here like dake. Soreni of course you have done, but we are going to revise it over here, and nagaku natta as well as yaranakya. And there is something very interesting also over here for you today in the lesson. So, let us see what we have. Now, this is in the script as we always have, and there are some kanjis that you can easily understand. You can even consult the Roman part and see what these kanjis are. I am not telling you, this is your homework. So, well, there was a new word over there which was naru. You have done naru earlier with nouns, if I am not mistaken, and you have seen how we use nouns with naru. Now, what does naru show? Well, it shows some kind of change, and the change happens on its own. Let us see how it is done. So, na adjectives and nouns, naru, and what is the particle? Particle is ni, as you can see over here. Sensei ni naritai, I want to become a teacher. Sensei ni narimasu, I am going to become a teacher. I am very, very clear about what I want. Sensei ni narimasu, I will or I am going to become a teacher. Now, this is with nouns. Ii kodomo ni narimashita. So, you will see that with nouns always ni will be used. Then with na adjectives, heya wa shizuka ni narimashita. It has become quiet. Or rippana hito ni natta. He has become a very, very big person. A person who has lot of character, who thinks big, who has a great personality. Rippana hito ni narimashita. So, hito again over here, and rippa na ni natta, for both you can see. So, always with noun ni is going to be used. You can make a number of sentences. I have done it earlier as well. So, you can go there and check out. Now, today we are going to learn naru with verbs and adjectives. In one way it is verbs, but finally those verbs are also treated as adjectives. You will see how it is done. As I told you earlier, naru does not take a direct object. And why it does not take a direct object? Because no action is happening. Whatever is happening on its own. Now, you can see over here, sensei ni naritai or sensei ni narimasu. This is what we did in our previous slide. Now, look at this sentence, soto wa kurai desu. It is dark. Soto is outside. Soto wa kurai desu. Now, mo soto wa kurai desu. Already it is dark outside is the meaning. Mo soto, you have done mo. Mo rokuji desu. Try to remember it from here. It's already rokuji. So, it's an easy sentence to remember for mo rokuji desu. Ikimashou. So, mo soto wa kurai desu. Then, soto wa kuraku narimashita. So, soto has become dark. It has become dark outside is the actual meaning in English. It has become dark outside. Kuraku narimashita. Now, how is this happening? How are we making this form? You can see. So, we have akai over here, nagai, takai. What are we going to remove? We are going to remove this I from here and put ku, Akaku arimasen. What does this mean? It is not akai anymore. Akaku nai, plain form for arimasen. So you have done this in negative. Akai desu, akaku nai desu. Now the same pattern for naru. Akaku narimasu or akaku narimashita. It has become red. So that's how you are going to make it. Now you can see for nagai and for takai. Nagaku nai. Michi wa nagaku nai desu. Michi wa nagaku natta. Tsukareta toki. When you are tired, michi ga nagaku narimasu. It becomes very long. Or takai, takaku nai desu. It is not expensive. Or takaku natta. It has become expensive. Yasai wa ima takaku narimashita. So you can do it like this. Yasai wa ima takaku narimashita. So now let us see some examples. Ringo wa amai desu. Ringo wa sweet. This, it's a statement. The kanji for amai is very, very simple. You can see over here like this, a simple kanji. Then we have Ringo wa amaku narimashita. It has become sweet by adding ku to amai, amai. Remove the I, put ku. Now, mo sugu ringo wa akaku naru to omoimasu. Or you can say mo sugu ringo wa amaku narimasu. So we did mo sugu in our last slide. Mo sugu means very soon. Not immediately, not in 2 or 3 hours, 5 hours, but very soon. Mo sugu ringo wa amaku narimasu. And then if you want to add omoimasu, I think you look at the ringo and you say mo sugu ringo wa amaku naru to omoimasu. Now what does this mean? I think that the ringo is going to become sweet very soon. So you can look at this one as well. Nisan nichi ni ringo wa amaku narimasu. So as I told you just now, Nisan nichi ni. Ni is time expression. For time expression. So Nisan nichi ni ringo wa amaku narimasu. It will become sweet. So I am sure now this ku naru is clear to you. Now the important thing over here is that to omoimasu. To omou will take plain form and naru will take ku narimasu for adjectives, and for nouns it will take ni narimasu. This is the important thing to remember over here with to omoimasu, which is I think always plain form is there of verbs. I think this is clear now. You can make more sentences. I also have some practice for you here. So what is he doing? Atsuku natta node. It has become hot. Node, thus because of this reason. Mainichi nikai, twice. Shawa o abimasu. I take a shower twice. Why? Because it has become hot. Now you have another picture over here. It's 10:30. 10 han ni natta kara. It has become 10 han. It is 10:30. Hayaku kairanakereba naranai. Hayaku is quickly. You also have a ku over here, and what actually is happening, all adjectives, when you put ku over there, it changes into an adverb. So you can do it for amai, akai, hiroi. So, amai is sweet, akai is red, and hiroi is spacious. Amaku narimasu, or amaku arimasen, or akaku narimashita. Hiroku nai desu. So, you can see over here, this is what is happening. So, 10時になったから noun になったから早く帰らなければなりません。Quickly I have to return. Now, what does this mean? 帰らなければなりません。なければならない。Verb in this form. So, 帰らない。帰らない。I will not go. But 帰らな, remove the I from here and put なければならない。or なければなりません。Though it is in the negative, I think I have done it a number of times. I am doing it again here. So, it is in the negative. The meaning is must. I must return. There is no way but to return. Now, why I have done this over here is because we have kaira na kya. Kaira na kya. This is informal for nakereba narimasen. So, awa nai. Awa nakereba naranai. Remove the I. Nakereba naranai. This one. Then, tabe nai. Tabe nakereba naranai. Kaira nai. Kaira nakereba naranai. So, instead of this, put nakya. The Japanese have this system a lot. All these long formations, they have these shorter versions of it and they use it in conversation, which makes it very, very simple. So, you just need to learn this, say these verbs in kya form, at least 10 of them, and the sound will settle in and you will be able to use it freely. I have told you how it is made and you can try and make it at home. I can give you another one, yomu and yoma, yoma nai, yoma nakereba narimasen, and yoma na kya. So, you can try doing this at home, practice it loudly and it will be very, very clear. Now, I will give you practice. Now, you can see this picture. Tanaka-san wa rippana sensei ni narimashita. Noun. Raigetsu watashi wa 20 ni narimasu. Noun. Mainichi 8 jikan nenai to byoki ni narimasu. If I don't sleep for 8 hours every day, I will become sick. Taro-kun wa ii gakusei ni narimashita. Again, noun. He has become a good student or good hito. Ii hito ni narimashita. Ame ga futta kara kuruma ga kitanaku natta with adjective. Kitanai. So, remove this and put ku natta. Ame ga futta kara. There was lot of ame, there was rain. So, the kurma became dirty. I think it is very, very clear now. Now, we have it with verbs. It looks as if we have it with verbs, but actually again this verb is changing into an adjective using the tai form. How is that done? Iki tai, nomi tai, tabe tai. I is there. Remove the I. Ku nai. Ku arimasen. Tabetaku arimasen. せん. So in the Thai form, verbs change to adjectives, and then we can use it exactly like adjectives and make this natta form. How? 何も食べたくなかったけど I did not want to eat anything. でもおいしいケーキを見て食べたくなった. The moment I saw this おいしいケーキ I wanted to eat it. 食べたくなった. I wanted to eat. Now, お母さんと電話で話した後、会いたくなった. After having talked to my mother, after. 電話で on 電話 after having talked to her on phone 会いたくなった I wanted to meet her. 会う is the verb 会いたいです。会いたくないです。Like adjectives 甘いです and 甘くないです。Adjectives over here. Then あなたのドレスを見て after having seen your dress 私も買いたくなった I also wanted to buy one for myself. So in Thai form verbs which become adjectives you can use it with naru. So basically this natta form is used with na adjectives, nouns, adjectives and in this form with verbs. So you can see the dress also over here. It's a beautiful dress. Now, 毎日日本語を勉強します. Now look at this construction. 毎日日本語を勉強します. 毎日楽しく日本語を勉強しています. 毎日楽しく日本語を勉強しています. 楽しい. Remove the I and put く. 楽しく勉強しています. 毎日日本語クラスで at the class 楽しく勉強をしています. I am studying. I am studying Japanese very happily every day at class. 毎日の日本語クラスは面白いです. So every day Japanese class is very interesting. Now, 毎日の日本語クラスは面白くなりました. So it has become 面白い. Maybe it was not 面白い earlier. It was very boring. つまらなかった。つまらなかった。boring. But now it has become 面白い. Maybe I did not understand earlier, so it was つまらなかった and now I understand, so it is 面白い or 面白くなりました. So I'm sure you can understand from here how you can use く and なります and say something else. だんだん日本語クラスは面白くなりました. だんだん gradually. 面白くなりました. Same くなりました construction, but different sentences, different words being used. 皆さん頑張ってください. だんだん日本語クラスは面白くなります. So if you work hard, gradually it will become interesting. Now, there was something in our previous slide, 2回電話します or 2回会います. So, time expression plus number of times you perform an activity. So, 週に2回おばあちゃんに電話をします or 週に2回おばあちゃんに電話をしますか question. So, A さん is asking a question. Do you call your grandmother twice a week? だいたい2回します. So, B さん says Tai Tai, most of the time, generally speaking, I do call her twice a week. So, the kanji for kai is like this, simple, nan, kai. So, now you have kai as the counter over here, kai for number of times an activity happens in a certain period of time or number of floors, nankai ni sumimasu ka. 4回です。うちは何回ですか ?4 回です。So, this is the character to be used. 何回しますか Do something. This is the kanji to be used. Now, see over here. おうちは何回ですか The moment you say おうち, it is about somebody else's house. So, おうちは何回ですか ?2 回です。So, Meera is going away from her house. So, her father probably is telling her, Meera, 週に1回お母さんに電話してください。So, I have written ください over here, but as its father, してね would be more appropriate over here because he is father, he can be informal, he doesn't have to always request her for something. Then, Meera, 週に1回お母さんに電話した方がいいよ。So, again he is saying more emphatically, it would be better if you would ring her up once a week. So, instead of shu, which is week, we can have other time expressions like 1ヶ月に1回、月に1回、month に1回、1年に1回、3日、3 days に1回 or 3時間に1回. So, after time expression, ni will be used because it is a proper specified time duration. And also, you can have different activities. For example, 1ヶ月に1回デパートに行きます or 月に1回映画を見ます。3日に1回靴を磨きます。靴を磨きます。I polish my shoes every 3 days. In 3 days, once. 3日に1回。1年に1回実家へ帰ります。Once in a year, I return to my hometown. Or 毎日3回歯を磨きます。So, you can also make sentences like this. Important thing over here is that after time expressions, you will have to use particle ni, and this is the construction over here. Whatever time expression, ni. 1回、2回、3回、4回, whatever you want to specify. 私は1年に1回母にお土産を送ります。I send a present to my mother once in a year. 1回母に to my mother. 1年に for time expression. お土産 is of course present. を送ります is send. Now, there is something very interesting which I want to tell you regarding gifts in Japan. As we just had this sentence over here, 私は1年に1回母にお土産を送ります。So, when do we give gifts in Japan? There are different times to give gifts, and gifts are a very, very integral part of their society. Why is it important to give gifts? Well, you connect to people very nicely. You show gratitude, you show love, you show respect, you show that you are fond of that person. Another very important thing is that they have made it a custom that you have to give gifts at certain times in Japan, and that is compulsory. So, you connect with family, you spend quality time with family, and the distances are reduced. So, let us see when they give gifts to each other. So, the first time when they give gifts is Ochugen. Now, what is Ochugen? You can see from the kanji itself, chu is naka. So, during July, first week of July till maybe third week of July, they give gifts to each other. That is the summer time. And why are gifts given? Gifts are given basically for appreciation, to show love, affection, to show respect to your loved ones, to people you are close to, your friends, your family. And it shows that you want to build bonds, you want to continue the association, you want to show closeness and fondness for one another. So, those are the reasons why you give gifts at this time especially. Now then, there is another time when you give gifts, and that is around December, and it's called Osebo. And why do you give gifts during that time, and to whom do you give gifts? Osebo is given basically to show gratitude to people who have been kind to you. You are indebted in some way, in some manner, and you want to show respect to the person, and you want to continue the bond, make the bond strong, strengthen the relationship. So, then that is the time when you give those gifts. And generally those gifts are to your office people, to people who have been very kind to you. So, where in a situation you have taken some help from them, they have helped you out, and they have been kind, helpful, you are indebted, that is the time. So, basically in offices and maybe friends, you want to share those gifts. Well, there are other times as well. Then there is Omiyage also. Omiyage, you all know, is presents, and when you are traveling, it's a custom in Japan that when you go out, then you get something for the person. Souvenirs are got, and basically souvenirs are sweets of that place, or maybe chocolates or something very small, but you give those omiyages as gifts. Then also you give gifts during marriage or during parties. So, you receive something from somebody, and as an okaishi, as a return gift, you generally give something very small, which is about half the price of what you have given to the person. So, that is another very interesting custom here. Now, on Valentine Day also, girls give lot of chocolates to people in the offices, men basically, to show gratitude for all the help that they receive from them, and at parties you give gifts. So, now how do you give gifts? So, one way you could say, or maybe the way any gift should be given, is to give with both hands and also to receive with both hands. Then you are supposed to bow also when you give the gift and when you receive the gift. And also, you are not supposed to open the gift anytime you want in front of anybody like that. You are supposed to open it quietly, because it may be a big gift, it may be a small gift, could embarrass somebody. So, you should be very careful about feelings. Then also another thing is that gifts are to be given in pairs. That is, you cannot give one maybe something small, but just one. Give it in pairs, like you want to give 2 soap cakes, or you want to give 2 something, so 2 books or something. That is how you are supposed to give. Then, as I have mentioned over here, you will see later that always the gift is given after the meeting, never in the beginning, because it shows as if you want to finish the meeting very, very quickly. So, these things are to be observed when you give gifts, and gifting is a cultural thing now in Japan. Please remember that. See, when you go to a Japanese house, take a gift with you to show your appreciation for what they have done. This was about gifts. And also, what are the things that you would gift to someone? Well, something small generally, not something very big. It could be green tea, it could be chocolates, it could be sweets, it could be cake or anything small. The size of the gift is not important, it is the kimochi, it is the feeling and how you give the gift. So, this is about gifts. So, now there was a small sentence in our last lesson where Meera says that I cannot go to India because I have a presentation, and also the ticket is going to be very, very expensive. Sore ni kippu mo takaku narimasu. And in our kaiwa here we have sore ni jikken mo owatte nai desu. So, what does sore ni mean? Well, sore ni is a conjunction and is equivalent to above this, more than, what I have told you. So, basically adding information to what you have told your listener earlier. And this sore ni here is about what I have told you earlier, and ni is what I am going to tell you, which is the most important thing. It could be positive information, it could be negative information. In the opinion of the speaker, what he is going to say now after sore ni is what he thinks is most important. So, let us see some examples. Dai ichi, kohi wa mazukatta. Mazui. It was not very tasty. Sore ni 10 doru mo haraimashita. And above this, I paid $10 for a cup of coffee. So, there is also some regret over here. There is also some feeling that I was cheated. Kohi wa 1 jikan ato kimashita. So, I had ordered coffee and it came after 1 hour. Sore ni atsuku nakatta. And after that, it was not even hot. Now, if you say the same thing, sore ni atsuku mo nakatta, that is even more strong. I waited for 1 hour and then when it came, it was finally not even very hot. Kono ryori wa totemo oishii desu. It is very tasty. Sore ni nedan mo takaku nai desu. And above that, it is not very expensive. So, sore ni should be written together. Atarashii Disney no eiga wa totemo omoshirokatta. Sore ni ongaku mo yokatta. It was exceptionally good, it was very good, and above all, the music was very, very nice. And then chicken burger, sore ni kora onegai shimasu. You give me chicken burger and also, and above that, after that also give me cola, Coca-Cola. So, now you know that sore ni means above that, more than. Over here, this is the meaning. Over here, adding more information to what has been said. So, sore ni. Try to use sore ni in your conversation. Make a few sentences and it will be easy to use because these sentences you have done already. This is what you are doing with sore ni. Now, there is another word which shows regret, which is zannen, and that was there in your kaiwa as well. So, zannen is an adjective and as I just now said, shows regret or disappointment over an action or over a situation. It could be yours, it could be someone else's. So, picnic ni ikanakatta no wa zannen da ne. So, we all went to the picnic, you did not go, we enjoyed over there and I am feeling bad that you could not come for the picnic. So, zannen da ne. Picnic ni ikanakatta no wa zannen da ne. Then, Rao-san wa kaigi ni kesseki shita no wa zannen da ne. He could not attend the, kesseki is could not attend, was absent. So, could not attend the kaigi, which is the meeting where probably we learnt a lot of things. So, thus it was very, very sad. We are a little disappointed. Taro kun wa shiken ni ochita no wa zannen da ne. So anybody does not get good marks or fails, obviously nobody is happy about it. So zannen da ne. Sore wa zannen na koto desu. That is a very, very sad thing. Something which has happened is not good, which is zannen. Now you will see over here, no wa is given. All over here, no is given, and koto. So no and koto both mean exactly the same thing, can be interchanged most of the time. So Taro kun wa shiken ni ochita koto wa zannen desu ne. Sad. Now there was another thing here which I want to do, which is dake. It's a particle, it's a simple particle, not very difficult. You see the sentences and you will know the meaning is only, and it is used in positive and negative both. So, nanika kaimashita ka? Iie, nani mo kaimasen deshita. Direct answer. Now, if you have to use dake, chisai ewa jiten dake kaimashita. I only bought a dictionary, an English Japanese dictionary. So the meaning is only and is used after nouns. Dake. Noun plus dake. So noun plus dake. Remember this. Dake means only. Just. Kaisha kara dare ga kaigi ni demashita ka? Rao-san dake ga kaigi ni demashita. Dake. Only. Only he came. So noun dake. So I am sure that now dake is also clear. Nani o tabemashita ka? Keiki dake o tabemashita. Party ni nani ga arimashita ka? Nani mo arimasen deshita. Soko ni keiki dake ga arimashita yo. So only cake. So sometimes it can be very strong, but generally it just states only. That's all is the meaning. And sometimes the meaning could be, is that all? So there is also surprise. Kore dake? Only this much? So you can practice this with your partner, and I'll give you exercises next time. Now you have an exercise here where you have to make sentences using these clues that I have given over here and use agemasu, moraimasu and kuremasu with dochira and yori. Ask and answer. There is another exercise. We did hoshi also in our last lesson. So use this and make sentences. Now there is a kotowaza for you. There is a cat and there is some money lying here. What is the kotowaza that you can think of? The cat is looking a little lost, does not know what to do with it. So well, neko ni koban. Koban is money, actually gold coins, and in olden times, because money was in gold coins, so it is koban. Oval coins were used earlier, so neko ni koban. What does it mean? Well, what does neko like? Neko only likes milk or fish. So if you give it money, what is it going to do with it? Nothing. It's a useless thing for the neko, and that's why it's perplexed. Why has somebody given me okane? So casting pearls before swines, basically meaning that you are giving something so important to somebody who does not understand the value of it. For example, if you give a small child something which he has no knowledge about, he will just not use it. It will be of no use to him. So, neko ni koban. Or you try to teach a class 1 child some class 12 physics, which has no meaning over there. The child will not understand. So, it does not make sense. So, neko ni koban, basically giving something to somebody who has no value for it. Now this is the kanji for cat. It's like this 1, 2 and 3, and then you have this one, and then koban is chisai and like this and this koban. There is lot of vocabulary today. Go over it, and with this I would like to finish today's class. There is lots for you to learn, lots of new things. Narimas you have done earlier also in your first series. Try to do it here. Make your Japanese better. Learn the kotowazas that I give you. These are proverbs and sayings which are very, very popular in Japan. And I'll see you in your next class. ありがとうございました。また会いましょう。